Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Halloween. How about that? Monday, October 31st, 2016, and the opener of the the first day of the last full week. How about that? Before, of course, our November elections, because we can't have an election on November 1st because reasons. We've discussed this in the past. We're all very easily confused, apparently, and we've forgotten that tomorrow is November, even though this is one of the most famous and well marked by even the children. 31st days of the month, anywhere in the calendar you care to place it. Honestly, we get a huge reminder that tomorrow is November, but no one thinks of it that way. They just think of it as candy hangover, I guess. So today's the day. And that's why we do the show in the morning, because otherwise the doorbell would be ringing all day long, and, Abby would probably be barking up in Connecticut all day long. I wonder what Halloween is like. Does Abby spend it in the basement? I don't know. We'll ask Greg Dworkin when he joins us. And, of course, a special Monday program today. I say, of course, because, I don't know, because it's happening. That's the way it is. Josie Duffy Rice will be with us to make good for last Friday. Busy day for her on Friday. Much better, she said, better material will be available for Monday. So let's see. And we'll put her to the test. Huge amounts of pressure coming down on her shoulders right now. As it should be. No. Okay. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. We'll always be smarter for having had a visit with her. And we'll check in with her later on. The weekend, crazy, of course. The FBI threw everything into disarray. And it wasn't the FBI. It was FBI Director James Comey, and, that'll be part of the news today, too. I don't know what to tell you that you haven't already heard or thought for yourself, but apparently there's written guidelines and procedure for how and when and whether to release material like this in close proximity to a major election, and the answer is no, you should not have been doing that. So, there's nuance, there's complications, etc., but I think it just comes down to this. Yeah, that probably shouldn't have been done. And it's in contravention to written FBI procedure, and he's going to have to answer for that. It's too bad. James Comey probably came into our consciousness nationally, standing up for procedure, really. I think his name first came to the fore when he was resisting the efforts by Alberto Gonzales and others inside the Justice Department and FBI to get then Attorney General Ashcroft to sign off on re-upping some of the torture programs and surveillance programs and every sorts of, I can't even remember exactly which one it was. And he was in the hospital, and they were just basically trying to get him under sedation to reapprove these things that should never have been approved in the first place. That's how we first came to our consciousness. But hey, people do good, people do bad, and you're going to have to rap them on the knuckles from time to time. This is it's a sad thing for somebody who had an otherwise pretty remarkable career. But hey, that's what guidelines are for. Don't want to follow them? Okay, well, you're going to get hit. Anyway, we'll dive further into that, no doubt, later on today. Maybe Josie would even have something to say about that one. In the meantime, let's round up some of the other stories, if there are any. Greg Dworkin is with us from Connecticut. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning. Well, listen, the Chicago Cubs won a World Series game in Wrigley in my lifetime.
That is pretty remarkable. That's even more remarkable than James Comey.
It's never happened before in my lifetime. We'll see if it ever happens again.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they got one under their belt. That's not their first win in the series, but it's the one at home.
I don't, kind of rooting for the Cubs, but, I'd love it if Cleveland won, so this is a win-win. Congratulations to the winner, whoever it is.
All right. Congratulations, Midwest.
And take that analogy to the election. Congratulations to Hillary Clinton, whoever wins, which will be her.
Okay. I guess so. Yes, it's certainly looking that way, even though something emails.
All right, so a couple of quick ones on that.
Yeah.
And we'll get to Comey. We'll start with Comey-related polling. This is a morning consult with the first post-Comey poll published in Politico. Comey's bombshell changes few votes.
Yes. I would imagine that would be the case.
In other words, IBD tip, same as yesterday compared to today. 2 points for a two-way, 1 point for a four-way. Washington Post, ABC, tracker poll, same yesterday, today, same numbers. LA Times, same yesterday, same today. And the new morning consult poll completely taken entirely after Comey's announced the discovery of new emails that might pertain to the former Secretary of State's private server or not. Might have been sent by her or not. Might have been duplicates or not. We don't really know. Clinton leads Trump 46-43 in a two-way, 42-39 in a four-way, and this is unchanged.
Okay.
39% of voters said the additional review of emails has no bearing on their vote. 33% made them much less likely to vote for Clinton, but most of those voters are already aligned against her. 2/3 of Trump voters say it makes them much less likely to vote against Clinton, but they were already voting for Trump.
Oh. Rats.
Okay. Among the small pocket of undecided voters, I think N equal 9 here, 42% said it made them less likely to vote for Clinton, including 30% who said it made them much less likely, but 41% said it makes no difference either way.
Yeah. Well, that's about what I figured.
There'll be a dramatic shift in the polls before Election Day. And interestingly, Matthew Dowd had an observation about this.
All right, I'll take it under advisement. Yes.
Okay, he said, I have a theory which is mine. It is my theory, and I will announce that theory soon, and this is the theory that I have. And it's not about dinosaurs being bigger in the middle and smaller at the ends. This is not Ann Elk. This is Matthew Dowd. He says, I have a theory. The race could be narrowing in non-target 40 states and remaining stable in the battleground 10 states. It's still a Clinton lead. I think that's a pretty good theory. I think that Trump should make a play for California. And then, if he could lower that margin, it'll look like he got closer than he really did. And here's a very quick 6-piece storified tweet storm from Jason Johnson, Dr. Jason Johnson, communications professor, Morgan State Politics, poli-sci, editor of The Root, now analyst, CNN, MSNBC contributor. He's actually very good, very smart guy.
Okay.
1. Political polarization of the electorate mixed with large early voting Dem base limits the impact of Comey letter last Friday. In other words, we're a tribal nation, just like you've heard from me for like the last 10 years. Number 2, there will be a change in the national polls, and then the race will appear to tighten post-Comey, but that was already occurring. And I threw into him a comment that, the polls always tighten, and in a normal year what would happen is that media reporters would get it wrong and attribute it to some sort of gaffe that really wasn't a gaffe.
Gaffe?
Because they love to do that. Remember those years?
What about your gaffe?
So naive and halcyon days, right? He made a gaffe.
Yep. Well,
Trump is a gaffe. He's a walking gaffe, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Trump campaign heading to Wisconsin and Michigan, which are either last-ditch efforts or a sign of confidence. I think it's the former, says Jason Johnson. Colorado and Virginia are off the map as swing states. Trump route to victory requires flipping a blue state or an obstacle course through the Midwest. Dems attacking Comey's integrity intentions don't seem like a good idea, but better him than the FBI. Trump will gin up support, but a cynical base doesn't trust FBI or Comey anyway. New info won't drive them any harder. It's mostly on the fence leaning, finally admitting who we know they were voting for all along, and the impact of Comey letter will be seen if suddenly top Clinton surrogates are stumping in what were safe states a week ago, Virginia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and they're not. So that's about where it is. So, don't get too nervous. It's going to be a relatively tighter race than we want to see, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
So how bad is it? Well, you got the people trying to gin up the idea. It's a close race. I didn't even watch Morning Joe today. I couldn't tolerate it because I'm sure they get everything wrong, and they'd say, "See, it's tied. I told you a week ago it was still close. It's still not that close a race." But we only have a week to go of the derp, so. What happens? Doug Shane goes on Fox News and says, I'm withdrawing my support for Clinton. I didn't even know he was supporting Clinton.
I didn't even know he was allowed on television.
Well, on Fox News.
Oh, well, that's different.
Shane and Cadell are their favorite Democrats.
Okay. I guess that's true.
I mean, 20 years ago, these guys might have been Democrats. I don't know. But I just wanted to remind everybody before they take Doug Shane too seriously. He and Cadell wrote this November 14, 2010 op-ed piece in the Washington Post, just as a reminder. One and done. To be a great president, Obama should not seek re-election in 2012.
Yeah. It's a great idea. How about, what do you have to do to be a great pundit?
If the president goes down the re-election road, we are guaranteed 2 years of political gridlock at a time where we can ill afford it. But by explicitly saying he was a one-term president, Obama can deliver on his central campaign promise, draining the poison from our culture of polarization. These guys are just brilliant.
Yeah.
Obama can restore the promise of the election by forging government and national unity, welcoming business leaders, Republicans, and independents into the fold. That's the problem. You know, whenever Obama doesn't kowtow to business leaders, Republicans, and independents, then therefore he's doing something wrong.
Yes.
And it's sometimes the default position of media, which is highly annoying, but it is sometimes.
All right. I'm I'm used to it by now.
Yeah, pretty much. We are used to it. So it's like, tell us something new. This is from Ned Resikoff, who I think works at Media Matters, if I'm not mistaken.
Ned.
But he's got a Medium post.
Oh.
Medium post.
Medium.
About how Trump lies so much that you can't even tell he's lying anymore.
Okay. That's true, too.
I mean, yesterday he was on TV saying that if Clinton is elected, she's going to open the borders, and the U.S. will fill up with like 950 million more people in a week.
Yes, I mean it doesn't matter that the number he used was different, but what's the point?
I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, he still said twice the population, the current population of the United States, was yet to come next week. I guess.
Whatever.
From where we don't know.
It just makes no difference. And what Resikoff notes, this is what Trump and his advisors are doing. They have no interest in creating a new reality. They're calling into question the existence of any reality.
Right.
By telling so many confounding and mutually exclusive falsehoods, the Trump campaign has created a pervasive sense of unreality in which truth is little more than an arbitrary personal decision. You can see that in the comments you get from Trump supporters on Twitter. Oh, the media lies to us. Which one? They all do. What do you mean? Well, Trump said this, but the media says that, so the media must be lying.
Yeah. That's the answer.
Right? So Resikoff says, this, I think, is why so many people support Trump, even when they recognize his obvious mendacity. They've been successfully persuaded that everything is a lie, so the only political choice you have is to select the fiction that most fits your self-conception. This partially explains how Trump is able to command support from both anti-Semites and some Jews. Pro-Trump Jews have decided Trump is lying to white supremacists and vice versa. They tolerate the lies because everybody lies, and because they've decided he's more honest when speaking directly to them. The only semblance of anything real can be found in personal identification with a charismatic orange-tinted hero figure. So he points out that there's theoretical underpinnings to this.
Yeah.
He goes on to write, I doubt Trump has personally studied the work of Vladislav Surkov.
I doubt that.
I wouldn't be surprised if his advisors have. Bannon and Ailes, in particular, masters of political unreality, especially Ailes. But the Surkov strategy works especially well with Trump because his roots in the world of reality television. In The Apprentice, as in the 2016 political election, viewers are rewarded for being savvy enough to understand that everything they see is BS. Yet these same viewers nonetheless get to choose their own heroes and villains within the context of the show. So it gets all philosophical here. And Surkov's philosophy is that there's no real freedom in the world. All democracies are managed democracies, so the key to success is to influence people, give them the illusion they're free, whereas in fact they are managed. In his view, the only freedom is artistic freedom. Right? Artistic freedom is the freedom to adopt political affiliations as a purely aesthetic exercise. And so for those of you who are philosophically inclined, you can take that approach to what he's doing. But let's get back to the Comey situation. We have this incredible piece of theater here where Comey on Friday afternoon decides that he's going to, somebody called it a have your own adventure statement.
Okay.
What's going on, and it's a Rorschach, so anybody who wants to read whatever they want to into it can. Oh, he must have a tremendous amount on the Clintons, otherwise he never would have done such a thing. Or, oh, he's got nothing. Why the heck did he make this statement, and why did he make it now?
Yes.
But it's
Right.
the same non-committal statement that doesn't really say much of anything. What we know, we think we know, and that's only from leaks, not from Comey, is that Anthony Weeder's a jerk, that his computer was impounded. There are apparently emails on it, and the FBI has to check.
Okay.
Now,
Yes.
why and how that should entirely upend the election, well, write your own adventure.
Yeah. It was an interesting weekend. And so people wrote.
They did. I got one here. This is Matthew Miller, TweetStorm.
Oh.
I wrote a piece in July on why Comey's public comments about Clinton were inappropriate abuse of power. That was back in July. In the Washington Post, he flagrantly violated Department of Justice rules with his press conference.
Fragrantly, it sounded like.
Then went on to break new ground discussing details of the case to Congress, followed by quickly releasing FBI 302, something they rarely do, and which I doubt they will do for future high-profile cases. Each time he either violated or seriously stretched DOJ rule and precedent. Press conference was the original sin, and it begat the rest.
Well, I don't even know. I don't even know what to make of this thing. I was very disappointed the whole weekend that this was even an issue, and I was very surprised. And I finally did find an explanation for why he would have possibly violated written protocol, and I guess the only nuance I could find in the whole thing was that he somehow felt that he was compromised in following protocol because of Bill Clinton's visit with Loretta Lynch. Was the closest I could come to anybody weaving together a narrative as to why he might have done such a thing. Are you on mute? I think your mute button must be on. You're unusually quiet.
Well, I'm listening.
Yeah, okay. Well, now what am I going to do? I don't have any more than that.
Oh, yeah? Well,
Yeah.
you take it.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Right.
So Smothers Brothers show. No, you take it. No.
There's nothing else
I
to
tell you
say.
to take it, you take it. Well, what if I don't want to?
Yeah, by the end of the weekend, it was pretty clear. Not only was he sort of lost in terms of the protocol, but I mean, it was amazing to find out that they hadn't even read the emails.
They couldn't because they didn't have
a warrant.
A warrant because they didn't get till last night. So Miller goes on to say, not just public discussion either. They often don't send subpoenas or take other steps that might leak until after an election is over. Why? Because voters have no way to interpret FBI DOJ activity in a neutral way. Who's the target? What's the conduct? It might be totally benign. It might not even involve Clinton. But no way for press or voters to know that. Easy for opponent to make hay over.
Yes.
Which takes us back to the original rule. You don't comment on ongoing investigations. Then multiply that times 10 close to an election. And then goes on to say things like FBI is undoubtedly investigating links between the Russian hack, Manafort, and the Trump campaign, but they aren't commenting on it. Good.
True.
Okay, but you know who did? Harry Reid.
So
here's a piece, Aaron Blake. Harry Reid's incendiary claim about coordination between Donald Trump and Russia. Reid actually sent a specific letter. He says, in my communications with you and other top officials, he writes to Comey, in the national security community, it's become clear you possess explosive information about close ties and coordination between Trump, his advisors, and the Russian government. A foreign interest openly hostile to the U.S., which Trump praises at every opportunity. The public has a right to know this information. I wrote to you months ago calling for this information to be released to the public. There is no danger to American interests from releasing it, and yet you continue to resist calls to inform the public of this critical information. And Aaron Blake goes on to say, even for a man known for bare-knuckle politics, this is remarkable. And finishes his piece with, as with the Romney allegation, it's always good to remember Harry Reid said that about Romney, that he had, something about his taxes, which turned out not to be true, but Reid has no regrets. As with the Romney allegation, Reid's suggestion that Comey himself has told him about this alleged coordination between the Russian government and the Trump campaign is now sitting there for Comey to either respond to or not. He's daring Comey to disclose something, and if Comey doesn't, in keeping with protocol, Reid can argue that speaks for itself and there's a double standard.
Well, yeah, he has them there. Definitely
so that's
true.
Harry Reid. So you have all of that out there. And let me just give you a flavor of a lot of the stuff that's been going on. Here are 4 of the best articles. They're not all the same in terms of the view, but I think it's, pretty unanimous, left and right. that Comey screwed up. And even if you want to justify why he screwed up because you assume Clinton is guilty, or you want to say why he screwed up because you have to assume Clinton isn't guilty, or that it might not even have anything to do with Clinton, everybody is dumping on him. This is Eric Holder. James Comey is a good man, but he made a serious mistake. This is Jamie Gorelick and Larry Thompson. James Comey's damaging our democracy. This is the most benign view you can take from it. This is Ryan Lizza writing in the New Yorker. I know Armando's going to get mad at this one. If Hillary wins, she'll be grateful for Comey's move, because this way nobody can claim it was a rigged election. Right?
Okay.
I don't buy that one. And then this one, which is really fascinating and actually one of my favorites, from James Fallows. James Comey and the Destruction of Norms. He's not talking about Norm Ornstein. Well, he is talking about Norm Ornstein in the article, but that's not. He's not destroying Norm.
Oh.
He's destroying norms.
Oh.
The role of politics hasn't changed that much in recent years. What has changed is adherence to norms in an increasingly destructive way.
Increasingly? Are we sure?
I made that case, says James Fallows, using examples different from the ones I'm about to present here 2 years ago. The shift in norms is also a central part of Mann and Ornstein's prescient It's Even Worse Than It Looks, and Mike Lofgren's The Party's Over, plus, of course, Jonathan Rauch's How American Politics Went Insane, our very widely read cover story in The Atlantic this summer. Today's examples. Before 2006, use of a Senate filibuster to block legislation or nominations was an occasional tool of the minority, not a routine practice. Now it's become so routine and normalized that a story in our leading newspaper can matter-of-factly say it actually takes 60 votes to bring a Supreme Court nomination to the Senate floor. Actually, it takes 60 votes only if there's a filibuster, which didn't used to be normal.
That is true.
Inconceivable as it now seems, 3 of Reagan's nominees were approved unanimously. Most Democrats in the Senate disagreed with some or all of their views. Not a single Democrat voted against them.
Yeah.
Good to remember.
Yeah.
Another example. Before February of this year, the universal assumption was that a sitting president's nominations would be considered, although, of course, they might be voted down. But before its sun had set on the day of Antonia Scalia's death, Mitch McConnell had made clear the Senate would not consider any nomination from the 44th president. And since then, John McCain and others have suggested that depending upon who becomes the 45th, her nominations might not be considered either.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable. Before this year, the norm through the post-Watergate era was any major party presidential nominee would make tax return information public. Donald Trump has flatly refused, and his own party's members barely bother to mention it anymore.
Yes. Well,
Before this summer, sitting Supreme Court justices, no matter how evident their partisan leanings, avoided publicly taking sides. Ruth Bader Ginsburg ignored that norm. To her credit, and in contrast to these other cases, she apologized. The official rules didn't change in these circumstances. The norms, the expectation of what you should do, what you really have to do, what the right thing is to do, even if the letter of the law doesn't spell it out, has changed, and it's for its survival, a democracy depends on norms. That's why the shift matters. You're a congressional expert. You could talk about how Congress could be tied up forever if people just decided they want to ignore norms and bomb through every minute of a congressional session. You can't get anything done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just something nobody has ever seen before, and I guess we'll have to see demonstrated before their very eyes before they acknowledge that it can happen, and then afterwards they'll just say, well, this is normal anyway.
Right. So then he gets to Comey in the context of all these other things that are not normal anymore. Yeah. And he says nobody knows what this will mean for the election, although the polling is starting to come in, not that much. Millions of people have already voted. In the 9 days until official election day, there's not enough time to fully vet and consider what Comey may have found. Will the announcement re-energize Hillary Clinton supporters? Well, it certainly got them ticked off. Yeah. Talking to the Clinton supporters here in town, many of them, women over 50, are furious at this because they just see the same double standard they grew up with all the time, and they are angry.
Oh.
Will the announcement re-energize Hillary Clinton supporters, making them worry about the race maybe tightening again? Well, Democrats always worry. And it tightens for the normal reasons. Clinton's already sucked up the Clinton supporters from the third parties, and now Trump is at the end sucking them up. The ones that were left tend to be Trump supporters, so that's not surprising. Depress them, motivate Team Trump, bolster their all-terrible case for third-party candidates, none of the above except in Utah, maybe. We don't know. I threw that last one in. We don't know, he says. But anyone experienced in politics, as Comey obviously is, would have known for dead certain that his intrusion would change the process in a way that cannot be undone. This is apparently what other officials in the FBI and Justice Department were telling Comey before he took this step, and people like Holder and the two prosecutors told him after the step. Two former deputy attorneys general, in fact, he references here Jamie Garlick, who served under Clinton, and Larry Thompson, who served under George W. Bush, made that point, that lambast Comey for his self-indulgent decision, emphasis added. And what does he say? The reasoning was that however important it might be for justice to do its job, and however important it might be for the public to know what justice knows, because such allegations could not be adjudicated, such actions or disclosures risked undermining the political process. That's why they say he should not have done this, and they, of course, are right. They conclude this move was so selfish on Comey's part, potentially protecting him at the cost of broader institutional destruction. He may well have been criticized, they write, after the fact, but it was his job, consistent with the best traditions of the Department of Justice, to make the right decision and take the criticism if it came. He didn't, and so they're mad.
Okay.
So that's as good a summary as any as to what happened.
So. That really does sum it up nicely. The rules say you wait. And, yeah, you'll be punished by Republican investigative committee chairs like Chaffetz, although, you know, they just don't hold that much sway. You're just going to have to take it on the chin from those guys. And, one of the more immediate effects is very likely the next president maybe doesn't really want to renominate you at any point when your term ends. But I think he was probably expecting that anyway. But, yeah, you follow the rules and you go and Chaffetz yells at you and you say, it's right here in the book, sir. What can I do?
You know, there's two parts to this, of course, and not ignoring Chaffetz's role in all of this. But part one is, here are the rules, and part two is, here's why there are these rules.
Yeah.
And people are talking a lot about part one. You know, you broke the rules. That's not what you're supposed to do. You were told not to by your superiors. You did anyway. The reason you ignored them, as you pointed out at the beginning of the show, is because of Loretta Lynch being compromised by meeting with Bill Clinton. And therefore, Loretta Lynch wasn't in a position to say, no, don't do that, because he had to do it independently to show everybody that he was pure. But that's not really the main thrust of all of this. You can't ignore the James Fallows point here, why those rules are what they are. That's why everybody else is writing and saying you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
First of all, don't assume that it has anything to do with Clinton or that somehow it's going to implicate Clinton. Republicans assume that as a matter of course and therefore justify what Comey did on the basis of that. You can't do that because you don't know. But secondly, there is a reason why those norms are the norms. And every time you violate a norm, whether it's not giving people your taxes or whether it's lying about everything, hoping that nobody will notice how many lies you have because only Daniel Dale can keep up with his, 25 lies that Trump said today on the stump, because he has a series on that. But every time you ignore all of that and say, okay, well, but the norm is broken. Oh well, what an extraordinary year. Let's move on. You're really hurting democracy.
Yeah. Well,
it's not normal to not let people vote. That's why there's a Voting Rights Act. Well, it is normal, and that's why there was a law against it.
Yeah. Well, that's true too. That's a good point. That's where we are typically. Yes, well, it's also a good moment to pause and say it's part of the reason we have written rules at all, or a written constitution, and as a matter of fact, in this country, was a departure from prior practice. But you write these things down so that in case you run into a situation where your attorney general says, I really need to recuse myself from the decision-making here, the rule still stands.
And if you can't agree on the rules, then there's one or several steps one agrees on in advance to take and then abide by decision. That's why, you had this whole Supreme Court thing. They decided they were the ones to interpret the Constitution, and everybody agreed to it. Yeah. I mean, that wasn't, so clear until they decided that that's what they were doing. But after years and years of precedent, we decided that's what's going on. It even comes up today. How many people belong on the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
8, 9, 17?
Oh, there's
what are the
no rule
rules?
against having fewer, and it's true. And unfortunately, it doesn't say anywhere how many there are supposed to be.
So it's 9 by tradition, and if you break the tradition and say, okay, now there's 8, you really screwed things up. There's a reason why the norms are the norms. And so I know that I sound like a conservative. Who knew I was this conservative? But there's reasons for why you have these norms.
Yeah.
And there's reasons why you stand, toward history and say stop when you see everything being destroyed. And so when people on Twitter say, well, Trump is really popular because I just want to throw a bomb and blow the whole thing up, you have no idea what you're talking about. You don't know how bad that would be.
Yes,
Don't do that.
Yeah, there's no convincing them of it, but yes.
Right, so you just have to outvote them, which is, I think, what's going to happen a week from tomorrow.
Well, that's good. It's about time. Let's get
Anyway, there you have it for the state of play. Now, what else do we have today? Well, we have the new Kurt Eichenwald Newsweek story.
Yes.
Donald Trump's companies destroyed emails in defiance of court orders.
Norms like court orders?
Donald Trump has a long, troubling history of destroying and hiding important documents and lawsuits, but he thinks Hillary Clinton's the one who should be going to jail.
Yes.
Over the course of decades, Donald Trump's companies have systematically destroyed or hidden thousands of emails, digital records, paper documents demanded in official proceedings, often in defiance of court orders. What's a court? Just an opinion.
Yeah.
In fact, people call them opinions.
That's right.
Of course it's an opinion. I have a different opinion, so I'm going to do it my way. All right? I'm
right.
walking here,
Yeah.
These tactics exposed by a Newsweek review of thousands of pages of court filings, judicial orders, and affidavits from an array of court cases have enraged judges, prosecutors, opposing lawyers, and the many ordinary citizens entangled in litigation with Trump. And you know why? Because they expect norms to be followed.
Yeah.
In each instance, Trump and entities he controlled also erected numerous hurdles that made lawsuits drag on for years, forcing courtroom opponents to spend huge sums of money in legal fees as they struggled, sometimes in vain, to obtain records. And this is why the people he has molested don't want to come forward.
Yeah.
I added that. This behavior is of particular import given Trump's frequent condemnations of Hillary Clinton, his Democratic opponent, for having deleted more than 30,000 emails from a server she used during her time as Secretary of State. Clinton and her lawyers have said all those emails are personal. Trump has suggested repeatedly that they were government documents Clinton was trying to hide and that destroying them constituted a crime. The allegation, which the FBI concluded was not supported by any evidence, is a crowd pleaser at Trump rallies often greeted by supporters chanting, "Lock her up."
Yes.
So it's sometimes useful to at least sum up what it is that Trump is really trying to say and what people at his rallies are hearing. What's the deal with the emails? He says that she deleted 30,000 personal emails. They must have been government documents, obviously showing how corrupt she was, and therefore she's corrupt. And Trump supporters buy this crap completely hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
Just like, sometimes it's helpful to step back and say, what's this Benghazi thing? Because we all knew that, it's been looked at tragedy, but, what's that got to do with Clinton? Well, she was responsible for killing 4 people.
Yeah, so she ordered them killed in many cases.
Well, no, she refused to defend them. She didn't order them killed.
Well,
she ordered everybody to stand down when they were trying to be saved.
And which they then say, so there you go. I mean, they could have been saved, and she ordered them not to be saved, so she killed them.
Right. Now, none of that is true, but at least you understand what it is they're trying to say.
Yeah.
So that's the deal with the emails, and that's the deal with Benghazi. But Trump's actually the one that destroys documents and tries to hide things. Yeah. Trump's use of deception and untruthful affidavits, as well as the hiding or improper destruction of documents, dates back to at least 1973, when the Republican nominee, his father, and their real estate company battled the federal government over civil charges that they refused to rent apartments to African Americans. The Trump strategy was simple: deny, impede, and delay while destroying documents the court had ordered them to hand over.
Yep.
And goes on to, in detail, tell about how that happens. So, talk about lying and making your own reality. They're really working hard to do that. And how does it all work out? People aren't discerning about this. They are to a certain extent. You have a small number of Republicans who say, I can't vote for this guy, and a larger number of Republicans who say he's a Republican, so he's not a Democrat, so he's not Clinton, so okay.
Yeah. Like Nikki Haley. She came out the other day. Oh, what was her line about it? I'm voting for him, but only something. What?
I don't know.
I don't remember how she put it.
Minor figure, and I couldn't even pay attention
amazingly
anymore.
Convoluted, but okay.
Meanwhile, Clinton is corrupt. Oh, actually, it's Chris Christie who's on trial now. and or at least in the court of public opinion about this Bridgegate thing.
Yeah,
and Trump himself will literally be on trial for child rape, for Trump University scamming, and potentially Trump Foundation scamming.
Yeah.
After the election.
Yes, very likely. Speaking of Chris Christie, he had a bit of a weekend, too, in the press anyway. Whose story was it that I thought of? It was the New York Post, I think, circulating this one, that the rumor anyway, or their reporting was that Trump had originally decided that Christie was going to be his VP and had as much as said so to him, and then Paul Manafort manufactured a way to keep him in Indiana by telling him his plane had mechanical problems, so that he would spend more time with Pence, and that they would have the chance to talk him out of naming Christie as VP. So a very resolute, sound decision. I think it's very interesting that the potential president of the United States, or at least that's how he thought of himself at the time, can be swayed by something like, well, why don't you, 5 more minutes. I saw it yesterday. 5 more minutes, he would have decided this passing squirrel was going to be his VP. This guy can't stick by anything. But what a decision that would have been. Now I would love to have seen.
In retrospect, yeah, this is a CBS story I sent you, which talks about the fact that what was described as a lucky break by the New York Times is actually a swift political maneuver devised by the now fired campaign manager, set on changing Trump's mind. He concocted a story that Trump's plane had mechanical problems, but the argument here is another source with direct knowledge contends it was Jared Kushner who made the final moves to seal Pence's fate and oust Christie.
Interesting.
Of course, Kushner's dad was prosecuted by Christie, and there's no love lost there.
Yeah. I was just thinking about what that would have been like as a campaign season with him barnstorming through the country.
But you don't want to get the impression that people are actually doing this stuff because of, personal vendettas or because it's somehow good for them.
Kushner is rising above his personal vendetta. What a man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I thought it was an interesting idea. Again, a matter of reading Trump's political mind, that the guy says, what we should do is a ticket of New York City and New Jersey. And I mean, not even upstate New York and southern Jersey. I mean, the metropolitan area, a path train ticket.
So amazing. I thought I would end this session with just a little update on Upshot's summary of prediction markets and prognostication sites.
Yes.
And we have New York Times saying 90% chance for Clinton to win, 538.79. We'll get that back to that. HuffPost 98, PredictWise Markets 87, down from 90. Sam Wang 99, Daily Kos 96. It's ticked up from 95 to 96 based on weekend polling. Charlie Cook lean Dem, Rothenberg lean Dem, and Larry Sabato likely Dem.
All right.
Why is 538 at 79 where everybody else is 87 to 99? Because Nate has built into his model, Nate Silver, maybe the polls are wrong.
Okay.
Which is a remarkable thing considering, where he got his start from.
Kind of. That is sort of weird. Like, maybe the whole basis of my, career
existence is incorrect.
But
I'll account for that.
You have to acknowledge that. But well, who knows? I mean, he can put a number to anything, I suppose. But I mean, if it's maybe all my input is wrong.
Well, there's a 57% chance this is all done for clicks.
I guess so. I don't know how you get to. Whatever. You come up with an algorithm. I mean, why it's not zero?
To his credit, he made the algorithm and he's living and dying with the algorithm.
Yeah.
Harry Anton, who also works on the site, said, look, Clinton's probably going to win. It's just that it's not done until it's done. Okay? Yeah. Everybody can accept that.
I can accept it. If they put out there, look, we made a commitment to live by our algorithm, and this is embarrassing, and we wish it was 90 plus like everybody else, but that's not what the numbers say, so it's probably going to come out just like everybody else is saying. But then again, 78, I mean, how do you be wrong? If she wins, and I said it was only 78% chance, I'm still right.
Right.
So, all right.
So they still give her 310 electoral votes in their.
Well, that's nice of them.
Yeah. And, here's the interesting states I think we're looking at now is Nevada, North Carolina, and Florida.
Okay.
Right? And the thing is, Clinton needs none of them.
Oh, well, yeah, that...
She's already won with Colorado, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Michigan, et al. Right? She's already got enough electoral votes to win without those states. But North Carolina, Nevada, and Florida are the most interesting states right now, partly because they're the next set of swing states that she needs to win. Iowa, Arizona, and Ohio are the next tier after that. And North Carolina, Nevada, and Florida have early voting. And so there's a lot of attention being spent looking at early voting, and especially because Upshot has done these really interesting Upshot Siena polls.
Yes.
Based on what's happening in those particular states. So the North Carolina one actually had Clinton winning fairly handily by like 6 or 7 points, and the Florida one over the weekend sent shockwaves through everybody because they had Trump up by 4.
Shock poll.
Shock poll.
Yeah.
Now, Florida's always going to be a 1% state, except Armando says 5.
Right.
Why does he say 5? Because he's right that a lot of the polls miscount or undercount people of color, Latinos in particular.
Yes.
However, there are other currents in Florida, including Midwesterners and other conservatives who have moved there, that always make Florida a very contentious state. So when you try to analyze early voting, it's really difficult. It's not totally robust right now on the side of Democrats. It's just not.
Oh, okay. I thought that it had a pretty recognizable slant to it.
Well, it depends where you look and how you look at it. And weekend polling, which isn't at the voting booth, that is to say, isn't in yet totally. So you really have to wait and see what happens with the weekends. And it's especially true in North Carolina because yesterday was the last souls to the polls time that you do this. So we're trying to follow all of this with experts, local experts like Michael Bitzer, for example, for North Carolina, or Steve Shale from Florida. And, the difficult thing is that it's really a little bit difficult to know exactly what's going on. But when you look at Michael Bitzer's material, the thing that is striking more than anything else is that Republican white voters are down a little bit, and Democratic white voters are in line with where they were in 2012. But there's a huge influx of non-party affiliated, NPA, independent voters. And you don't really know how they're going to break. And because you don't really know how they're going to break, it kind of confounds your ability to do early voting analysis. Here's another part. If there are never Trumpers amongst Republicans, the fact that Republican ballots get returned doesn't tell you exactly who they vote for.
True.
And how do we know this in particular? Because Michael Bitzer's actually done an analysis of where they're from. In other words, part of the reason that the white vote in North Carolina is slightly down is because urban whites are down.
Okay.
Rural and suburban whites are running about where they were in 2012.
All right.
So maybe, this is why you look at the tea leaves, scratch your head and say, well, what does that mean? Are urban white voters in North Carolina more likely to be never Trumpers and therefore they're just not showing up?
Maybe.
Is that good for Democrats? Is it bad for Democrats? It used to be like 50% of the white vote would be from the urban areas, and this year it's only 45%, and so suburban and rural percentages are up, but actual votes may be the same. And that may be good news, or it may just be tea leaves. And then you throw in the non-party affiliated folks, and you scratch your head and say, I'm seeing the data, but it doesn't really tell me what's going on. I hope that makes sense.
It makes some. I get what we're guessing at, but there's
You're
no
trying to see
data
where the
yet,
votes
so we
are,
can't-
who they're from.
Yeah.
56% of the voters are women. That may be good news for Democrats.
It may be.
If Republican white vote is down, that may be good for Democrats.
Oh, maybe.
We know black vote is down, but that's because they screwed up the polling places on purpose to make it difficult. And that's why we need yesterday's souls to the polls number to really see what's going on. But this is only early vote. It doesn't mean that they're not going to vote on Election Day if they couldn't vote early. So it's really hard to know exactly how to interpret it. So that's why the political scientists say don't get too carried away with trying to analyze early votes because you often don't really know what you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean,
Even the
you
experts.
can't. It's just the nature of the secret balloting, so
Right, exactly.
too bad. Well,
New York Times has a daily tracker what the early vote in North Carolina means.
okay.
As of this morning.
They're going to try. Okay.
Yeah. And this is based on polling and then contacting the people who answered their polls. Already voted, Clinton 55, Trump 41. Yet to vote by their polling, 46-44. And so they see it as a 6-point win for Clinton. But that's all based on polling.
Yeah.
So that's North Carolina. That's Florida. The last state is Nevada. And there actually is some good news for Democrats. And the expert there, of course, is John Ralston. And he has an early voting blog that he's doing for one of the local TV stations. And it has a lot to do with the makeup of the population in Nevada. That is to say, Clark County, which is heavily Democratic, Las Vegas area,
Yeah.
is a huge proportion of the vote in Nevada, which is mostly desert, and
true.
rural areas. And then the other area is Washoe County, including Reno, often seen as a bellwether there because it can go either way. And the idea is the Democrats run up their vote in Clark County, and then that acts as a firewall for when the rural vote comes in and it's all Republican.
Yeah.
And then Washoe can go either way. What he's found so far is that it looks just like 2012 when Obama won the state fairly easily. They've got 47,000 votes in, and it looks like for Democrats, and Washoe's at 2,500, which is almost twice what it was in 2012, and the rurals are 15,000 for the GOP, as it often is. So 47,000 in Clark versus 15,000 for the rurals, and Washoe is splitting, and so that looks pretty good. So basically, this is already 30% of the vote, and Ralston says if that holds, then Trump's not going to win Nevada.
All right. Well, if.
Right? If he doesn't win Nevada, he's not going to be president.
No, not likely. My chief concern is that Clinton win all the states in where Trump has molested the Miss USA contestant. That's
that'll be
what
50 states, right?
Yeah, well, it's a strategy anyway. But yeah, anywhere he's been accused of having groped Miss USA, Miss Teen USA, whoever you want to count, those are the states that I want to see us win. Now, I'm not certain we're going to win all of them, but I think that's the most important metric.
I just clicked on 538 this morning, and it has a perfect illustration of, what's good about data journalism and what's bad about data journalism. All
Okay.
right? So the good part,
list.
Harry Enton writing, how much do October surprises move the polls? And he's got some pretty good data saying not that much. Maybe a point or two. And then Nate Silver has election update. What if Clinton wins North Carolina and loses Pennsylvania?
All right.
That's not happening, so I'm not even clicking on that.
Oh. Well, what if? Nothing, right?
Nothing.
Yeah,
Exactly.
okay.
So there you have it. I mean, that's as good a summary as I can give you as to state of play today.
State by state.
State by state. But, again, Nevada and Florida and North Carolina up for grabs. Arizona, Ohio, and Iowa leaning, kind of toss up, maybe a point Republican, but nobody really knows. That'll be interesting to see in terms of what happens. That's where ground game comes in. Bottom line is Clinton still has a very solid path to 270. Looks like she'll be the next president. And it's only Monday morning, so let's see what else comes out today. Bombshells?
Yeah.
Or bombing runs? Or whatever military sneak attacks? I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
There's still a week to go, unfortunately, and it'll be very nice when this whole election's over with. Take care. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning. And you got, I don't know, an hour and 10 minutes to go. Let's see what's on your plate. That was what was on mine.
Yeah.
And we'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it again.
All right. Very good. Thanks very much, Greg.
The election will have changed. Everything will have been changed by tomorrow.
Yes, all of
not.
it, too. And if we could get, if there's some portion of the 650 million people that are coming who could listen to the show, that would be very helpful, I think.
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
boosting our numbers. That's the best news about the tripling the size of the country come January.
Take care.
Thank you. You do the same. And let me suggest also, though, to people ready to flood across the borders that it's not tourist season, January, and so I don't know whether that's the most advantageous time for you to come flooding across our borders. If you're flooding across the southern border, I guess you're still going to be okay. You'll be in some warm weather regions. If you're flooding across the northern border, I guess understandable, seeking the warmer climes of, say, Minnesota or Maine or North Dakota as you're escaping Canada. But I don't know. It didn't say, I don't think Trump specified whether, although I did see it suggested that all 650 million new immigrants flooding across the border would come immediately upon her, I guess upon her inauguration, although he may have even said upon her election. November in, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, not bad. Still nice out, short sleeves weather. So if we wait till January, it's a little dicier in some of the areas, but still, generally speaking, I think decent weather. Of course, up north, I couldn't guarantee the weather for you. Are you coming in by sea? That's a possibility. North Atlantic, not where you want to be, of course. So, yeah, I guess we're thinking of people floating in across the Gulf of Mexico, or I suppose the Pacific approach would be a decent one as well. It never really gets too cold coming in from the Pacific. So if you're planning on swamping the country, I guess, I just want to give you some travel tips. Best places to come in, timing, etc. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. That was really one of the dumbest things. He said an awful lot of dumb things, but this one really took the cake in terms of just how blatantly stupid it was. I mean, for a guy who lives and dies by numbers, when the numbers are dollars anyway, you'd think he'd be a little bit better at, offhand math. Like 650 million people. Although he did know offhand that it would triple the size of the country. And he said in 1 week. I guess that was really amazing. But I guess that's where the innumeracy of it really becomes so striking. I saw some people calculating out 650 million people. I think somebody even tweeted to me yesterday something like talking about 3.9 million people coming across the border every hour in order to fill it up in 1 week. That is a pretty amazing rate. I don't think they're going to be able to make that work. But hey. Just one of many dumb things that happened over the weekend. There are many more, of course, and we could mine a few of them. We are expecting to hear from Josie Duffy Rice, just a reminder for those of you waiting for her segment. Somewhere around, I'm going to guess about 10:30 is what we hear most recently. So there's a few more things we can jam in. And guess what? They're probably going to be about Donald Trump. Let me see what we can do in terms of getting a good cross-section of things in there, but also some of the stuff that's in-depth and looking pretty interesting. Good profiles. I don't think any of you need to be convinced about what kind of person Donald Trump is, but what else are we going to do for the rest of the week? Eventually, we're not going to have him to kick around anymore, I guess. We're going to have to stop commenting on ongoing investigations at some point. All right, of the least consequential of the bunch, but just an interesting follow-up to all of our too much of the attention I gave, too much attention to Trump and his golf lies. I just wanted to add, it doesn't matter what sport it is. He lies about all of them. SportsGrid.com has this one. What is SportsGrid? I don't know. I'll tell you this. Up on top at SportsGrid, they have, those different verticals. You can go to the different sections of the site to read about all the awesome stuff they have about sports. It goes like this. Category 1 is all. That would be about, I guess, all sports. Category 2 is girls. It's not girls' sports, I don't think, like softball, etc. It's girls. Hot girls you can look at. And that's what we've got. So it's pictures of models who have taken Instagram pictures of themselves mostly naked, and pictures of celebrity women, and pictures of the women that male celebrities are dating. So I don't know how serious a site like that really is, but then again, that might as well have been my description of Daily Caller to you. It would have been just as accurate. And Tucker Carlson is all over television. In fact, saw this morning, he was going to be on TV with Brian Boiler was writing that he was on with Cokie Roberts, I guess, to analyze the emails story. So it was important, I thought, for everybody to hear from Tucker Carlson so that he could rate how hot the writers of the emails were, and are they total smoke shows or not. Tucker Carlson, by the way, almost 50 years old, and leading the preteen masturbation fest that is Daily Caller. Really kind of disqualifying at this stage, but I don't know. Donald Trump was like that, and he's running for president, so you tell me. Anyway, Donald Trump says, according to SportsGrid, if you're not going to click on the Paulina Gretzky pole dancing story, or whether or not Ole Miss quarterback Chad Kelly has been caught again DMing Mia Khalifa, whoever that is. She's the young lady in the tight-fitting crop top here next to him. Pornhub responds. I'm not sure what any of that is supposed to mean, but those are your choices. SportsGrid. Choice 1 is about baseball, ostensibly. Chicago Strip Club offers Cubs free lap dances for life if they win the World Series. And then the rest of the sports news is a sports guy's daughter is hot, and a sports guy likes a hot girl. So they're all about girls. So really it's a feminist publication, I guess, if you view it properly. Donald Trump, though, told somebody, and SportsGrid found out somehow in between, I guess they pulled their pants up and found out that Donald Trump said, I was the best baseball player in New York. How do you like that? That's a hell of a claim. Because, I don't know if you know this, New York has 2 professional baseball clubs, and many of their players are very good. And when he was even younger, when he was younger, they had more. And some of those guys were good too. I was trying to think, how old is Donald Trump? Yeah. He would have been around when they had more than the 2, although they didn't have Mets when he was younger. It was Giants were still. All right, anyway, here's the claim. The day that a new Donald Trump tape comes out is just like Christmas for me, says Rick Chandler, who is willing to say he writes for SportsGrid. For one thing, I'm usually wearing my childhood pajamas. I believe that. And the less said, the better on that. But mostly I just enjoy unwrapping big surprises, and the Donald is full of those. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow found it. So many of you likely know it already. And gleefully presented it on her show on Thursday. To me, it's even better than the Billy Bush bus tape because it's more recent. That is 2014. Less ugly. And he rates everything based on that, I'm sure, and paints a more complete picture of Trump's archaic psyche. It's full-on narcissism here, spoken in a language that any sports fan can appreciate. And there are a lot of sports fans in the world. Pulitzer Prize-winning author Michael D'Antonio wrote a book called The Truth About Trump last year, in which the subject sat down for several hours of audio tape interviews to dish out facts on his life. One segment involved his athletic days at the New York Military Academy in the early 60s, which he attended from the 8th grade through his senior year of high school. The segment about his time on the baseball team is just the best. And here's the excerpt. I was always the best athlete. Something that nobody knew about me. I was the best baseball player in New York when I was young, but I also knew it was very limited because in those days you couldn't even make a lot of money playing baseball. That was everyone's chief concern about baseball then, naturally. Everybody wanted me to be a baseball player, but I was good in other sports too. I was good in wrestling. I was very good at football. I was always the best at sports. So our writer here continues, I'm assuming that Trump meant he was the best amateur player in New York and didn't mean to put himself ahead of Mickey Mantle or Roger Maris. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because Trump isn't exactly on intimate terms with annoying grammar elements such as coordinating conjunctions and prepositions. Up to half of his words occur only in his head. That is true too. But we get the gist. It's as if Trump was created for a Westworld-type amusement park populated out by cowboys but celebrity lawyers. How are you as a hitter? He is asked in the interview. The best hitter. Of course he was. And just as he is on the campaign trail, specifics aren't important. He could have said I hit .465 my senior year or something like that, but it's not enough for Trump to say I was the best and assume, it is enough for Trump to say I was the best and assume that everyone will just take his word for it. I sincerely hope that someone contacts his high school coach, who is now 90, so that he can confirm that the Donald wasn't much more than a somewhat talented first baseman. I'd love to know, not that it's really super important, but I don't know. I get a kick out of these things, as you know, and I spend far too much time talking about them. What else have we got? Well, let's see. The big story over the weekend for many of you was David Farenthold's latest. This would have been the Washington Post piece entitled, Trump boasts about his philanthropy, but his giving falls short of his words. I would like to comb through this one, but maybe not today. In all likelihood, many of you have already combed through that one. But I guess what's really interesting about this one is the story that everybody traded. Although maybe this is the day to do this one, and we'll save the other piece that I was looking at from this morning, which was, as I recall, Benji Sarlin's piece. This one running where? NBC News running this one. His analysis of Donald Trump, I guess overall, the vengeful world of Donald Trump and why it matters. Maybe that's a sort of a closing statement argument. But maybe what we'll do is while we're making our way through the headlines, we'll go to this one. This did get a lot of discussion. And chiefly because of one story, which I think is going to fall up top here. Yes, as a matter of fact, here it is, and it's illustrated with the photo from the October 1996 charitable event in New York City. That this is the one everyone was chatting about. In the fall of 1996, a charity called the Association to Benefit Children held a ribbon cutting in Manhattan for a new nursery school serving children with AIDS. The bold-faced names took seats up front. There was then Mayor Rudy Giuliani, former Mayor David Dinkins, TV stars Frank and Kathy Lee Gifford, who were major donors, and there was a seat saved for Stephen Fisher, the developer who had given generously to build the nursery. Now, that was very nice of him to do. Of course, the story very quickly turns. Then, all of a sudden, there was Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, of course, also a developer, also in a position to give generously, also in a position to build the building, but he didn't. But hey, maybe there was something else, right? No, you already know how the story comes out, so I'm not surprising anybody. Just want to put it on the record and comment. Nobody knew he was coming, said Abigail Disney, another donor sitting on the dais. There's a kind of ruckus on the floor, and I don't know what's going on, and in comes Donald Trump. He just gets up on the podium and sits down. Trump was not a major donor. He was not a donor, period. He'd never given $1 to the nursery or the Association to Benefit Children, according to Gretchen Buchenholz, the charity's executive director then and now. But now he was sitting in Fisher's seat next to Giuliani. Remember, Fisher is the guy who actually gave a ton of money to build this nursery. He just took his seat. Frank Gifford turned to me and said, "Why is he here?" Buchenholz recalled recently. By then, the ceremony had begun. There was nothing to do. There was something to do, but they wouldn't do it. Of course, the thing to do was, "What are you doing here? Hey, everybody, it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Interesting that you should show up here. You aren't a donor to this at all. What are you doing up here on the stage? Why don't you get the hell out of here, you fraud?" But, people don't do that. And then the immediate reaction, I'm sure, just like, there's so much packed into this, just like with some of the situations in which he is assaulting women, their first reaction is to say, this either can't be happening, or this isn't right, or maybe I've forgotten something. Perhaps somehow this is my fault. Did I overlook a major donation from Donald Trump, or forget about it, or misprocess it? Because nobody does this. This isn't done if you're not a donor and you know you're not a donor. What is going on here? But so they just don't do it. Just sing past it, she recalled Gifford telling her. So they warbled into the first song on the program, "This Little Light of Mine," alongside Trump and a chorus of children, with a photographer snapping photos and Trump looking for all the world like an honored donor to the cause. The cameras can't tell the difference, right? Afterward, Disney and Buchenholz recalled Trump left without offering an explanation or a donation. Fisher was stuck in the audience. The charity spent months trying to repair its relationship with him. I mean, what's wrong with you, man? Disney recalled, thinking of Trump when it was over. For as long as he's been rich and famous, Donald Trump has also wanted people to believe he is generous. He spent years constructing an image as a philanthropist by appearing at charity events and by making very public, even nationally televised, promises to give his own money away. It was, in large part, a facade. A months-long investigation by the Washington Post has not been able to verify many of Trump's boasts about his philanthropy. Instead, throughout his life in the spotlight, whether as a businessman, television star, or presidential candidate, the Post found that Trump had sought credit for charity he had not given, or had claimed other people's giving as his own. You already know this part of the story. It is impossible to know for certain what Trump has given to charity because he has declined to release his tax returns. In all, the Post was able to identify $7.8 million in charitable giving from Trump's own pocket since the early 1980s. In public appearances, Trump has often made it appear that he gave far more. There was the promise to give away the proceeds of Trump University. His promise to donate his salary earned from The Apprentice. His promise to give personal donations to the charities chosen by contestants on Celebrity Apprentice. He promised to donate $250,000 to a charity helping Israeli soldiers and veterans. Together, those pledges would have increased Trump's lifetime giving by millions of dollars, but the Post has been unable to verify that he followed through on any of them. Instead, the Post found that his personal giving had almost disappeared entirely in recent years. After calling 420-plus charities with some connection to Trump, the Post found only one personal gift from Trump between 2008 and the spring of this year, and that was a gift to the Police Athletic League of New York City in 2009, worth less than $10,000. Now, as you know, the charity that Trump has given the most money to over his lifetime appears to be his own, the Donald J. Trump Foundation, but that charity, too, is not what it seemed. The Trump Foundation appeared outwardly to be a typical, if small, philanthropic foundation set up by a rich man to give his riches away. In reality, it has been funded largely by other people. Tax records show the Trump Foundation has received $5.5 million from Trump over its life and nothing since 2008, but has gotten $9.3 million from other people. Another unusual feature, one of the foundation's most consistent causes was Trump himself. New findings, for instance, show that the Trump Foundation's largest ever gift, $264,631, was used, why, how? To renovate a fountain outside of the windows of Trump's Plaza Hotel. His smallest gift ever, by the way, $7, was paid to the Boy Scouts in 1989 at a time when it cost $7 to register a new scout. Trump's oldest son was 11 at the time. Trump did not respond to a question about whether the money paid to register him. Hello. What a cheapskate. You remember when Rick Santorum was using $7 or so at a time out of his leadership pack to pay for lunches at Arby's, and everyone thought that was cheapskate crap? Billionaire, supposedly, paying the $7 to register his son in Boy Scouts out of the Trump Foundation. At least it was his own money then. But goddamn. At other times, Trump used his foundation's funds to settle legal disputes involving Trump's for-profit companies. We know those stories. And to buy 2 large portraits of himself, including one that wound up hanging on the wall of a sports bar at a Trump-owned golf resort. Those purchases raised questions about whether Trump had violated laws against self-dealing by charity leaders. In advance of this story, the Post sent more than 70 questions to the Trump campaign. Those questions covered the individual anecdotes and statistics contained in the story, including the tale about Trump crashing the ribbon cutting in 1996, as well as broader questions about Trump's life as a philanthropist. Exactly when, before this spring, did Trump last give his own money to charity? What did Trump consider his greatest act of charity in recent years? Trump's campaign did not respond. How does Hope Hicks do it? The result of the Post's examination of Trump's charity is a portrait of the GOP nominee revealed in the negative space between what he was willing to promise and what he was willing to give. All of this is completely consistent with who Trump is. He's a man who operates inside a tiny bubble that never extends beyond what he believes is in his self-interest, says Tony Schwartz, Trump's co-author on his 1987 book, The Art of the Deal. Schwartz has become a fierce critic of Trump in this election. If your worldview is only you, if all you're seeing is a mirror, then there's nobody to give money to, Schwartz said, except yourself. In repeated interviews with the Post this year, Trump has declined to supply details about his giving, saying that if charities knew what Trump had donated, they would badger him to give more. Oh, no. I give mostly to a lot of different groups, Trump said in one interview. I love that. What a statement that is. I mean, that's so stupid in and of itself. I give mostly to a lot of different groups. You can't even choose one because, 1, he doesn't give any money to anybody, and 2, he's basically trying to say, I give very concentrated, purposeful donations, except I don't give any, so what a dummy. I give mostly to a lot of things. Can you give us any names? Asked the Post's Drew Harwell in May. No, I don't want to. No, I don't want to, Trump responded. I'd like to keep it private. Yeah, right. Anyway, there's far more to this. I guess I really wanted to jump around a little bit on this subject. One, just to, I guess right from the top, I gotta agree here with, Abigail Disney. Who the hell does something like this? Goes to a ribbon cutting for an AIDS charity for children, knowing he hasn't given any money, and not showing up to give any money at the last minute either, and pushing out the guy who actually did give a lot of money, and screwing up their relationship with this charity too. Imagine, here's a major source of funding for this very important charity, who now says, to hell with this, I'm not going to be involved in this one anymore. So Trump is actually stealing, essentially, a lot of things in this, but most directly, of course, he's costing them dollars from Stephen Fisher in the future. But I wanted to frame it this way. If what's happening here is essentially an analog to, and I know this is a dumb term, but we all understand what it means, stolen valor. You remember that? Use of as a term, people who it's generally applied to people who lie about their military service and pretend either, I guess, occasionally people just outright pretend they were in the military when they really weren't, but people who say that they were somehow heroic in their service in the military when they in fact were not, and we call that stolen valor. And we actually, that's the sort of thing that is that incenses us so much that there was actually, I think that's where the term comes from, that it was legislated against. It's actually punishable by law to do such things. And this is sort of the entitled rich brats version. And I say entitled rich brat because generally speaking, your entitled rich brat is never going to come within 100 feet of serving in the military at any point, but some do, I assume, at some point, or occasionally. Back in the days when you had to serve, you find yourself some cushy position to do it from. But, yeah, Donald Trump has essentially stolen the valor, whether directly out of Stephen Fisher's pocket or from somebody else. The whole idea was to get himself photographed and thought of as a philanthropist when he wasn't one. It's rich guy stolen valor. And it's a theme that continues. This is just the most blatant example of it because no dollars get to anybody's pocket at all in this one. He's just walking in, getting his picture taken like he did something good, and walking out without doing anything. And I don't doubt that in his mind, if he ever thinks of himself as having done wrong at all, I suppose he could convince himself, I really should be giving some money here. Maybe I can use the Trump Foundation and convert it to the purpose of laundering other people's money. I know that I'm pretty sure that he still doesn't believe there's anything wrong with taking other people's money, putting it in the Trump Foundation, and then giving that money to charity. Except, of course, well, there are a number of things wrong with it. One, that's not your money. Two, very often the charities you're giving them to aren't charities. Like sometimes they're the attorneys general of states where you're under investigation for fraud through Trump University, things like that, or or sometimes the money even does go to charity, as it did in the case of the lawsuit settlement in Palm Beach over the flag violation, and the Palm Beach city government designated a charity to which Donald Trump could contribute in order to settle their outstanding claims against him. But instead of contributing himself or contributing money from the corporate accounts of Mar-a-Lago, which was the entity in trouble after all, he instead paid it out of the Trump Foundation, which is a no-no. But anyway, he continues to do this over and over again. But this example really was amazing. Here, I would love to know what his justification is for it. Except for the fact that you can't get him to tell the truth about anything, I'd love to hear him answer questions about that. But this is the guy's MO. And again, I will reiterate that this whole thing, this whole investigation, they're so mad at Fahrenholtz for having done all this digging in the foundation because, of course, they say you shouldn't be looking at our foundation. Look at the Clinton Foundation. It has the name the word foundation is right in it. Obviously, the connection is right there for you to see. There was never any interest really in the Trump Foundation. It's only interesting because Fahrenholtz found out in asking the question he was initially concerned with, what happened to the money you said you were going to donate to those veterans charities, that he then finds out, oh yeah, well, all the money that he collected online anyway, and I assume most of the other money that was collected in some other way, I'm not sure what other channels he was taking in dollars through, but the money was getting parked in the Trump Foundation, which, interestingly, I mean, we probably came about that close, and any other reporter perhaps might have said, oh, okay, well, that's the end of the story, because the Donald J. Trump Foundation is obviously, as it was designed to appear this way, just one of those things that rich people establish foundations and they use that to give away money, their own money typically. But Fahrenholtz, I think, probably recognized, it seems he recognized right away, although it is possible that he didn't, but he may have recognized right away, that's odd. Parking other people's money in a foundation named after you, I don't think is the usual practice. But it may not have gone that way. He may instead have said, okay, I don't care. I don't know, or I don't care, or both, or either, about where the money is being parked. The question is it going out to veterans charities? You don't have to know anything about foundations or charitable organizations or the laws that govern them to want this answer. Where did the veterans' money go? I put it in the Trump Foundation. Okay, and now has it left the Trump Foundation and gone to veterans or not? And in actually all cases, at the time that Farenthold begins his inquiry, the answer is no. None of the money has gone to any veterans organizations. It's only the arrival of Farenthold's questions at Trump campaign headquarters and with the officialdom at the Trump organization. That's the motivating factor here. That's the only thing that gets anybody to start moving to get money headed out the door again. And I got to tell you, there are very few conclusions you can draw other than that Donald Trump may have had no intention whatsoever of distributing those funds ever. Though he may very well have. Yeah, I'm sure this is going to be impossible to prove. Of course, he would just say, oh, yeah, I was absolutely going to give that money to veterans on my own time. You know, in due course, I would have gotten it to them. It wasn't admittedly my top priority. I was, after all, running for president of the United States. But again, a guy who's actually got a sizable staff can just say, hey, take care of this for me. I want you to identify some veterans charities and give them the money. That's not hard. It's not difficult to do. It's not difficult to find someone willing to do that. But he didn't even bother with that. And, it's as provable that he absolutely intended to give that money away honorably as it is to say, no, he intended to keep it. He actually intended to pocket it. He was going to abscond with the money. They are standing on equal footing. Prior to Farenthold's involvement in this and asking those questions, it was impossible to tell outwardly whether he simply was biding his time or intended to steal the money and run away to Mexico with it. Mexico might not be your first guess as to where he was going with it, but, that wasn't really the issue. What was really going on here was that he was taking other people's money, holding on to it, drawing interest on it, by the way, and sitting on it, and there was no answer for how soon or to whom might all this money go until Farenthold asked. And then they started scrambling, trying to give the money away. And then still we have outstanding questions. I would love to see somebody do some forensic auditing of this. As I recall, he was claiming about $6 million in donations, $1 million of which was for his own money. Or supposedly. And I think they fell slightly short of it, and they had inflated something like $5.4 million into $6, but even so, $5.4 million, $1 million of it is his. That means $4.4 million from other sources. I think they only claimed about $1.9 million raised online. So I don't know where the rest of it came from. But we still have this unanswered question. You remember back a couple of months ago, we learned about the charity up in, was it New Hampshire, Liberty House, that ended up getting, originally they got handed a ceremonial giant check for $100,000 that said the Donald J. Trump Foundation on it, but also said Make America Great on the bottom, which indicates, one, some improper cross-pollination between the Trump Foundation and the campaign, and two, that even in the minds of the people who arranged this stunt, it was viewed as a stunt. You would not otherwise have the campaign slogan on the bottom of your check. They had to make a conscious decision to do this and to have it printed up that way. And, that's indicative of some pretty serious commingling of funding and efforts, etc. But then recall that the giant ceremonial check, of course, isn't the one that they take to the bank. Liberty House doesn't have $100,000 at the moment they get the giant ceremonial check. Yes, it's in fact true that those are, if they contain all the elements, if you remember back from business law, if they contain all the elements of a negotiable instrument, you can in fact cash one of those giant checks, which is probably why Donald Trump has learned over the years not to have anything that even looks vaguely like it might possibly be a Donald J. Trump signature on those checks. Take a look at the pictures online. You'll see it's unsigned, but that's okay. Nobody grouses about that because very few people really believe that they are destined to take that giant check to the bank. They know that a smaller one that everyone recognizes as a negotiable instrument is soon to follow. And a check did follow, but of course we learned from, I don't know whether we learned from Farenthold or from other reporters, that check was in fact drawn on the Stuart Rahr Foundation. That's his good friend Stewie Rah-Rah, #1 king of all fun, Trump Tower fraternity house resident as well, or office tenant anyway. And we've learned an awful lot about Stewie Rah-Rah and the way he operates, but we have no idea why he wrote that check at all. The innocent-ish explanation is, well, I raised money from all over the place, and part of the money I raised was a $100,000 pledge from Stuart Rahr, and I said, hey, I'll tell you what, instead of writing the Donald J. Trump Foundation a $100,000 check from the Stuart Rahr Foundation and then having the Donald J. Trump Foundation write a $100,000 check to Liberty House, why don't you instead, for expediency's sake, simply write a $100,000 check to Liberty House and put on the memo line that this is really from Donald Trump because he was the one raising all the money for this effort. And that's probably even how they conceived of it. It's just weird because, of course, we learned from other stories that doesn't bother Donald Trump in the least. And sometimes Donald Trump's interest in the whole thing comes from doing that laundering, as was the case with the Charles Evans Foundation and the donation to the Palm Beach Police Foundation. He could easily have said, for expediency's sake, guys, why don't you write a check from the Charles Evans Foundation and send it to the Palm Beach Police Foundation, and you can write on the memo line that this is really from Donald J. Trump and the Donald J. Trump Foundation. But they didn't do that. They took care not to do that. That would have been the easiest thing in the world because, of course, the trustee of the Charles Evans Foundation that approved the $150,000 donation to the Trump Foundation was also someone who sat on the board of the Palm Beach Police Foundation. I can't even remember the guy's name offhand, but we could certainly look it up for you. But you remember that was the meat of the story. The guy could have done this easily himself, but he was fooled into laundering it through the Trump Foundation because he's after the stolen valor value of this. But for some reason, I guess because he had been caught out by Farenthold, time was of the essence, I guess, unless there's $100,000 in the Trump Foundation account that came from small donors that he absolutely, positively, and for some reason intends to keep or had spent on himself somehow, for all we know, by that point, and he was just short on the money, and he needed Stuart Rahr. And Carl Icahn also did the same thing. He likewise has a foundation in his name, and he too wrote checks directly to some of these charities and tried to convince them that it was really from Donald Trump and his fundraiser. I just found the whole thing really pretty amazing. And coupled with the fact that, one, he was doing this to veterans, I found rather pathetic, of course. And two, that it meshes so well with his other horrible attribute that we reported on last week, which was his overt efforts to prevent disabled veterans from exercising their right to sell as street vendors anywhere near his fabulous Trump Tower. And, of course, going out of his way to make sure that everybody knew that he thought that disabled veterans were deplorable. I found that surprising, let's say. But just one of those things that, once again, you show up at something like this ribbon cutting and just, take the credit for it. In fact, there was a great comment that came in to my Twitter account about it over the weekend. So I'm going to have to scroll when we're talking to Josie to see that I credit that comment correctly. But somebody really hit the nail on the head in commenting. He treats the charities like he treats the women that he keeps molesting, in the sense that if you're a star, they just let you do it. And isn't that exactly what happened to here in this situation? He walks in, and even Frank Gifford, who in his own right is a star, and he says, just sing past, just let it go. And the director of the charity knows this is a travesty, but everybody's just caught up in the norms. Everybody except him. All right? So just another parallel, right? Hold that up against the Eichenwald Newsweek piece about how he's continuously and routinely destroying evidence in court cases against him because the norms don't apply to him and they don't know what to do. The courts know that they can hold him in contempt, put his lawyers in jail, put him in jail. You can actually do that. But everybody's like, it's just not done. Everyone else is busy adhering to norms. Speaking of which, and I know I'm running up against things here, and we expect to hear from Josie any minute here, but I just thought I'd sneak this one in. Quick commentary on, again, I guess the issue of when you're a star, they let you do it. And what a double standard that, too, can sometimes be, as between the genders. That, and I bet you didn't think I was going to go in that direction. I didn't think I was ever going to do this story either. But I put this one aside, and now I've got to scroll forever before I find it. But in the vein of the stories coming out now about Donald Trump and his sexual assaults on women and the pageant contestants and everybody, there was a story recently in the papers about Taylor Swift, the pop star, country turned pop, by the way, star, who, I mean, everybody knows Taylor Swift, but coming out with a story of her own about having been groped by somebody, some doofus. I think I actually did make mention of the fact on the air that story was now out there. It's like a radio guy, a local radio guy at a meet and greet before or after one of her local concerts, who she says, in court, she ended up having to testify against a guy, just basically stuck his hand up her skirt and squeezed her butt during a photo op. And I was just so surprised by the whole story that you could, I mean, oh my God, she's a huge star. Here's, if you're a star, they let you get away with it. Here, she's the star, but she's a woman. And he's a nobody, but he's a man. And he does get away with it because she's stunned into, not submission, but silence anyway. She's just stunned into like, what in the world is going on? And this was the saddest of all the stories I had heard, which is amazing because, she's got every advantage in life being a megastar and all that. But still, at bottom, I guess this is what it was. It was so revealing to me about what this sort of attack can do to women. She's a star. She could have squashed this guy like a bug. And instead, her first thought is, am I sure I'm feeling this? Have I done something to invite this? And she clams up. And here she is, a worldwide superstar, and she could have had this guy's head torn off. You don't think that even if it was 2013, but still she was a big star. She couldn't have called a bodyguard and said, take this guy out and kick his ass. Tear him limb from limb. Do you know what he just did to me? Are you kidding me? I'm Taylor Swift. You're going to die. But no. Instead, it was just this stunned silence, and I don't know. I can't even remember whether I made mention of this the other day when I saw the story or not, but I wanted to get it out there, and I thought it was an interesting parallel to the liberty that Trump seems to take when he arrives at this, of all things, a charity event for kids with AIDS. I don't think you could really come up with a worse thing to do. Of course, and that would only be, that usually, again, the norms that apply here. I couldn't think of anything worse to do than cheat a charity aimed at kids with AIDS, unless, of course, you also had a December court date related to allegations that you had raped children. But he's surprising us at every turn. I guess there's no bottom with that guy. All right. Turning now to our visit from Josie Duffy Rice. Josie, I didn't mean to open the door and just start ranting about Donald Trump and his various problems, but I know that's probably on your mind somewhere too. But,
yes, okay. I think I will feel a lot better when this election is over.
Yes, I should hope
about
so.
The state of humanity.
Well, hopefully they'll vindicate themselves alongside us by next Tuesday. But welcome. Thank you for coming and visiting us. I know Friday must have been a busy day. Everybody else was, of course, obsessed with by the afternoon with James Comey.
Yes.
And did that occupy your mind over the weekend at all?
It sure did. It occupied a lot of my time, and it was crazy kind of just to be on Twitter and watch the bad reports come in saying that an investigation had been reopened when it hadn't been.
Right.
Just to kind of, watch how terrible news gets produced. Terrible news gets produced from terrible decisions, but even when the decision isn't as bad as the news is reporting it.
Yeah, it was definitely the kind of decision too that lent itself to that sort of misinterpretation. Particularly, the investigation has been reopened because,
right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very easy interpretation to make, but
right.
Yeah, and only technically, I suppose, the investigation had never been closed, and so it couldn't be reopened. But even that didn't really satisfy anybody. But
right.
But well, hey, prosecutorial misconduct is everywhere.
It's there. It's there every time you turn around.
So from the lowest levels to the highest.
Yeah.
So it's a systemic problem. I guess now by definition. It has to be considered.
Yes, I would say that this is absolutely a systemic problem. I was watching a movie last night with my husband from the mid 80s or something, and it was all about prosecutorial misconduct, and it was just exactly what I am still covering every day. So things are not changing fast enough.
No, but as we let's see, I know that last time we spoke, you had been working on letting everybody or making everyone aware of local prosecutorial electoral contests prior to the election coming up. Any other last minute warnings for people who head to the polls?
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping I'll talk to you on Friday too, but
yes, please.
I think I last time talked about Bill Montgomery in Arizona, and Devin Anderson in Houston, and those are still the two big ones that are coming up. A lot of these races are in 2018. I'm not exactly sure whether they're so often on off years, but these are the two big ones coming up in next week in 8 days. And what I will say about them that I think is really interesting is that of the four biggest counties in America, so that's L.A., Harris County, where Houston is, Cook County, where Chicago is, and Maricopa County, where Phoenix is. All four of them had DA elections this year. And in LA, Jackie Lacey is running unopposed. But in the other three counties, we're talking, big races and really bad prosecutors. So Cook County's race in March, the big race in Cook County was the primary, right? And that was in March. And that was where Anita Alvarez kind of got taken out of office, and it was a huge organizing victory. It was a huge Black Lives Matter victory. And now we're looking at the other two counties of those four. Harris County, Devin Anderson is going against Kim Ogg. And then we have the efforts to get out Bill Montgomery in Maricopa County. So an interesting story about Bill Montgomery last week is that Bill Montgomery, Prop 205, is on the ballot in Arizona, and that would legalize small amounts of marijuana for recreational use in Arizona. Okay. This would be a big deal, right? Like, Arizona is a law and order state. There are a lot of people there in jail, paying fines for low-level marijuana use, and it would be really not just a victory for those who believe in legalization, but a victory for criminal justice reform if we could kind of reduce the amount of people serving time for marijuana offenses or serving any sort of punishment for marijuana offenses. Yes. But Bill Montgomery, who's the DA in Maricopa, and you guys might remember me saying a couple of weeks ago that he was endorsed by Sheriff Joe. He's really old school, terrible, law and order, conservative, values. And he has really fought against Prop 205. I mean, he has 2 Twitter accounts on both of them. He's always talking about Prop 205. He really has been fighting this, and he fought against the medical marijuana proposition that was on the ballot in 2010 that passed. I mean, he's really fought these laws. Well, what kind of came out last week is that his office really benefits from these laws that make marijuana possession illegal, because they have a diversion program, which he keeps talking about, right? He keeps talking about the felony diversion program that they have that says, well, why do we need to legalize it? Because if you come into our office and you have a low-level marijuana offense, we send you to a private rehab center. What he doesn't tell you is that, what he doesn't mention is that costs the offender about $1,000 to go to these centers, right? And his office gets $650 every person that they give to this center.
I see. So they kind of kick back.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like 65% of the program cost goes back to the county attorney's office.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's the program cost, because I bet the program
fee anyway.
It's just what the offender is paying. So a lot of that, I'm sure, is just pure profit, right?
Could be true. Cost could be $100.
Right. Right. And so over the past 10 years, his office has made about $15 million from referring clients to Task, which is this private drug treatment contractor. That's not a small amount of money. Now, it's not a huge amount of money in an office where the budget is around $90 million. So I don't want to overstate, how much percentage-wise money that they're making from this kickback program. But these are government offices, right? $1 million is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And it's a lot of convictions that they kind of get to rack up in the process. And it's easy convictions. All you have to do is bring someone in, they're diverted to the program, and you get $650 just like that. It's really not, it's not not tough money. That's for sure. Not tough money.
Yeah. I mean, well, if they ever arrest Donald Trump for it, he can just go in and say, why don't I just give you $650 and you let me out of jail?
Exactly.
I don't understand why the middleman here.
Right. Exactly. Although he will not donate it, because that's
right. It'll end up coming from the Trump Foundation.
Right. Exactly.
That's okay.
Exactly. One guy who is the chair of the campaign to regulate marijuana like alcohol, so he also is coming from his own personal beliefs, but the way he put it is, it may not be illegal, but it is absolutely corrupt. And that's kind of what I find to be so problematic about this, is that here's a guy arguing that, he has really made his arguments about marijuana are so dated. The county attorney, Bill Montgomery, they're so dated, right? You're hearing him say, oh, it causes fatalities, and for drivers, it causes, just the way he's kind of speaking about marijuana is does not line up with what scientific evidence says. Mm-hmm. And it was, and for me, like, writing about this, it just felt so, it felt like such a weird hill to die on, to spend all your time on as the county attorney, because obviously public opinion is kind of shifting in this area. Why don't you kind of like play to stuff that works better? Why are you spending so much time on Prop 205, especially when you're up for re-election? Mm. And the answer is, he hasn't said this, but now I have more reason to believe that the answer is money. And when we talk about fines and fees, right, like when we talk about what it means to be kind of wrapped up in the criminal justice system, it doesn't just mean going to prison. It means, this is sort of, you get caught with a teensy bit of marijuana, and then you have to pay $1,000 for this program, and then you're randomly drug tested, and you have to pay, $14 every time you do that, and then you have to get fingerprints and photographs done, and that's $50, and and then if it's a more serious drug, you're paying more money, and it's just the people who are more likely arrested in Arizona. And it might just be in Maricopa. I'll double check this, but if you're black, you're around 3 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana use. there are about 500 people per month who are booked into the local jail on marijuana possession charges. That's about, that ends up being about 6,000 people per year, which is a lot of people. That's 16 people per day. It's a lot of, it's a serious disparity, between what we want our law enforcement focused on, right? Mm-hmm. And what they're actually spending their time on.
Very true. And, it's very easy for us to understand how they would look at the question as, well, every time we make one of these busts, as dumb as it is to be prosecuting people for it, it's $650 in our budget.
Yep.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, that ordinarily shouldn't fly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it was any sort of other position, we'd be asking some questions, and I suggest we ask some questions about this position too. It just, we want our people in public office to not be benefiting from criminalization of other people. That, to me, that just feels like a basic principle. Obviously, it's not a basic principle because, as we know, people profit all the time from the criminalization of people. But to me, that seems like a basic part of democracy. A functional democracy is that our elected officials don't benefit from their citizens' incarceration or their citizens' criminalization. That seems, it's baffling to me that that's still so controversial.
Yeah. Well, stripped down to the basics, it's, if I arrest you for marijuana, if you give me $650, you can walk.
Right.
Stay out of jail anyway. And then I'll charge you $14 every couple of months to test you.
Right. Exactly. Which doesn't sound like the end of the world, right? But if you're making minimum wage, that's an hour and a half's work. And, you have kids and you have food to buy and who even knows if you're guilty, because you don't want to wait in jail if they set bail really high. You don't want to wait in jail. You're just going to take that plea deal. And it adds up. It really does add up.
Yeah.
And let's see, there's another, story worth bringing up, which is that in Houston, Devin Anderson, and I think I spoke about her a little bit last time too. And I can't remember which stories I told you guys, but, I'm not sure I told you the stories about, the evidence. Or maybe I did tell the story. Do you remember if I told the story about the evidence?
We did talk about, what was going on with a lot of, refresh everybody's memory.
Okay. So Devin Anderson has been DA in Harris County for about 3 years. While she's been there, she's similar to Bill Montgomery in that she's this sort of like law and order, quote unquote, candidate. Mm-hmm. And she made news, she kind of was like in progressives, progressives kind of were admiring her earlier last year because she chose not to prosecute the Planned Parenthood officials who were on that video. Remember the doctored video about selling fetus parts that turned out to not be about selling fetus.
Yes. I don't think we heard that story last time.
Yeah, so she was progressives were kind of saying, wow, how brave of her, et cetera. And I wrote then, and I've kind of tried to continue following up now, that she's really not, she doesn't deserve the progressives' love.
I see.
That was a good decision. That was a, broken clock twice a day, right?
Okay.
So she's done a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning. The first is that she knew in February that a local police precinct had destroyed 21,000 pieces of evidence.
Ah, yes. Okay.
21,000 pieces over about 10 years. 8,000 pieces were destroyed in July from the previous check. So 8,000 in the most recent January since the previous check. So that's the most recent, destroyed evidence kind of batch. Mm-hmm. And she knew this in February. She quote unquote opened an investigation in February, but she did not tell defense attorneys who had cases open where the evidence had been destroyed. She did not tell even line prosecutors in her office. She literally didn't tell anybody that 21,000 pieces of evidence, including hundreds, up to about 1,000 pieces of evidence that were relevant to current cases. And it's not just drugs, right? We're talking guns were destroyed, like clothing, other things things for cases that just unfathomable to destroy 21,000 pieces. I mean, can you even imagine that number? That number is like out of my understanding.
Yeah, I would think that you'd probably make the papers for 10.
Right.
10 times? That's
right.
Crazy, yeah.
Exactly. And here she is, and she didn't tell anybody. And so defense attorneys, sort of as a whole, didn't figure this out until a man was up for trial facing a 25-year sentence for possession of meth. And his defense attorneys discovered that the evidence had been destroyed. So then they start asking a couple questions, right? And she admits that 21,000 pieces of evidence have been destroyed.
Why? Why
Well,
would you admit it? Why'd they do it?
The reason that it had been destroyed was because there was a kind of a cop who was in charge of the evidence room who, I mean, you know, interpretation theory, right? On one hand, he might have just been like completely lazy and corrupt. And on the other hand, he might have been completely overwhelmed. You know, he had a huge evidence room. It wasn't labeled. He didn't really know what went where for why. And the understanding is kind of that it's somewhere in the middle of both. He should have obviously not destroyed 21,000 pieces of evidence, but he also should have had some backup and some help in making sure that the evidence room was organized and taken care of. And there should have been someone looking over it more often so that people didn't only realize it when 21,000 pieces went missing. But wow. For her, it's just another sign of kind of no integrity. That's kind of what I think about when I think about Devin Anderson. And, you know, she's the same woman who she made news a couple months ago because she jailed a rape victim. Do you remember this story?
Yes, this one you did bring up. Sure.
Yep. She jailed a mentally ill rape victim because the rape victim had said that she didn't want to testify, and that testifying was kind of triggering sort of a mental health episode in the victim, and so she threw her in the county jail for 28 days. And to kind of add insult to injury, she ended up somehow the victim got misidentified as the person who perpetrated sexual assault instead of the victim of sexual assault. And so while in jail, she was beaten up, she was harassed by both inmates and guards. And it made kind of national news. And, you know, and Devin Anderson, the DA, sort of says, well, what was I supposed to do? And the answer is, you know, this is how mass incarceration happens, right?
Yeah.
This is how mass incarceration happens when the DA says, well, what was I supposed to do other than jail the victim? We wanted her to testify. Well, I understand that. And I think that, I understand wanting a victim to testify. The rapist was a serial rapist, so if she was the only way that you could have convicted anyway, you don't have a very strong case, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
but either way, we need to have some basic standards of decency. And if your job is to protect victims, I mean, that's her job.
Yes.
That's her job. That doesn't sound like protecting victims to me.
No. I mean, victim, yes, but also shows they wanted her to testify as a witness. If only there was some sort of program where they could protect witnesses.
Right. Exactly.
Before, I don't recall any of the mobsters, you know, who are turned state's evidence. Oh, I've murdered 16 people. How about a hotel for you? All right. Now you.
Exactly.
Sexual assault victim. How about jail? And I guess I could see it would be easy for the other inmates to say, oh, yeah, sure. Of course you're actually the victim. They put the victims in jail all the time.
Right.
Beat her up.
Exactly.
Wow.
And, you know, the interesting thing about it to me is that I don't think she would have done that had she thought she was going to get caught. You know, it kind of came out, but it could have easily not come out. It turns out it's not the first time she's done that.
Wow.
It's not something she's done a ton, but she has done it. And, I mean, if you're up for election, and you are supposed to be accountable to people, supposed to be accountable to residents, supposed to be accountable to victims, supposed to be accountable to safety, how can you possibly think that this is a good idea? I mean, it's mind-boggling. But you see a lot examples of someone like Devin Anderson. I would argue that Anita Alvarez in Chicago was sort of like this too. They've basically only ever been in this kind of prosecutor's environment, right? Devin Anderson was also a judge for a short time. She didn't win re-election on that case. And she did sort of private practice for a while, but she sort of started in the DA's office under one of the worst DAs in history, who ended up sending 200 people to death row in the 90s. And it becomes this sort of mindset where it's very hard to step back and see the bigger picture. You know, you see that in campaigns with elected officials all the time. You see that in our own Congress all the time, where you kind of get so mired in the day to day and the kind of you winning the battles that you kind of lose the war, right? And she kind of embodies that to me so heavily. And she's also made news in the past week because she brought up her opponent's sexual orientation during an interview. I can't imagine a job where it matters less that you're a lesbian than being DA. I mean, what kind of relevance does that have? It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters about as much as your hair color. Like, who cares? But she's really trying to win this race, Devin Anderson is, and she's appealing to the lowest common denominator, left and right. So those are the two biggest races kind of coming up. And when I call in on Friday, I'll tell you a little bit more about some races happening in Ohio. But I think that it would tell your friends who live in Harris County and Maricopa / Phoenix and Houston to pay attention to these races, because it would be a huge victory for progressives, for criminal justice reform, to beat Bill Montgomery and Devin Anderson, and it's possible. It is very possible. So to think about those in the coming days, and I have a couple articles out about all of them from the past few weeks, so you can check those out on dailycoast.com.
All right. So everyone, wherever you live, of course, do your best before setting out to cast your ballot to check up and down the ticket everywhere, but pay attention to those local races, prosecutors, DAs, sheriffs, etc. And you know what? As a matter of fact, you can get in touch with Josie if you've got someone locally that is either suspect or you have questions about.
Yes, please.
I know you held that out as a possibility. Where can they reach you, Josie?
You can reach me at prosecutortips@gmail.com. If you go to dailycoast.com, my name is Josie Duffy Rice, and there's a Google form on my page that you can also fill out anonymously. You can find me on Twitter. I'm J Duffy Rice. And I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody about their DA, what you think might be going on. Yeah. If you have any information, just let me know.
All right. Well, thanks for putting that offer out there again. I thought that was an interesting one last time. Let everybody, you can check in if you're on your way to cast your ballot and you think there's something you ought to know about the local criminal justice officials up for election in your area. Check with Josie. And yes, please do come back on Friday. Give everybody a refresher prior to heading out next Tuesday if you don't get a chance to vote early, so that everyone can hear where the most critical contests are. Thanks so much for coming by today and reminding us of just how awful these two are.
Thank
Amazing
you.
Stories. And stay tuned to everybody else for more next Friday, or I guess this coming Friday, rather.
Yes.
And Josie joins us again. Thanks again,
All right,
Josie.
thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
And now time for us to wrap up here on the Kagro in the Morning Show and hand things over to the guys at the After Show. Coming up next here on Netroots Radio. What kind of stories will you hear? Well, it's always the best stuff. They have the best words, basically. That's how you know it's going to be a good show. Usually all the stuff that I should have gotten to but didn't because I obsessed over things like Donald Trump being the best baseball player in history. It's Metaphor Monday on the After Show. Here is what they've got in store. A Pennsylvania gun store doesn't feel safe arming Hillary Clinton supporters. Donald Trump's Las Vegas supporters cheer wildly after a rally speaker, Wayne Allen Root, calls for Hillary to die.
From Daily Coast Radio
Hold on.
netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
By the way, not just to die, but to die in a fiery crash. She's so nice, Wayne Allen. Also, the election of 2016 is tearing apart marriages and relationships in every State of the Union. On the last half, they'll be reporting on how astronomers think they've discovered the gravitational signature of Planet 9. There's much more to come. Stay tuned.